Alzheimer's disease is very predictable. It has a very predictable pattern. So we know that certain issues are going to come up, and we know sort of the process of decline that you might be experiencing. So by educating yourself, you can understand what might be happening, but more importantly, your family members are going to understand what they're going to experience while you are battling this disease. Currently, right now, over 5 million people in the United States have Alzheimer's disease, and that's a good estimate. But we're expecting those numbers to rapidly increase, and that's because Alzheimer's is an age-related disease, and America's aging. So as America continues to age, we're going to see higher proportions of people with Alzheimer's disease.
More than 5 million people in the United States have Alzheimer's disease. And according to the Alzheimer's Association, not only is Alzheimer's disease the 6th leading cause of death in the country, but it also currently cannot be prevented, cured, or slowed. Barring the development of medical breakthroughs to prevent or cure the disease, the number of Americans with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias will grow each year as the size and proportion of the U.S. population continue to increase. By 2050, the number of people aged 65 and older with Alzheimer's is expected to surpass 7 million. By 2050, that number could reach 16 million. Alzheimer's disease is also the 6th leading cause of death in Kansas, and about 12% of Kansans currently have the disease or related dementia. On today's Sound Living, understanding the risk factors, signs, and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Early diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is important. That's why K-State Research and Extension agents are helping to educate Kansans about the risk factors for the disease by conducting programs focusing on 10 early signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's, the difference between typical age-related cognitive decline and Alzheimer's, what to do if they notice any or all of the signs or symptoms in themselves or a loved one, the process of getting a diagnosis, and the benefits of early detection. Erin Yelland, an assistant professor in the K-State School of Family Studies and Human Services and an adult development and aging specialist with K-State Research and Extension, says there are a number of risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, with age being the biggest risk factor.
We know that Alzheimer's disease is an age-related disease, and most of the people who get it are over the age of 60 years old. So age really is the biggest risk factor. The next risk factor is a familial history, especially if your parents, your brother, or your sister have the disease, then you're more likely to get the disease. One of the other risk factors for Alzheimer's disease is a gene that's called a familial Alzheimer's disease, or FAD. And this is a gene that's carried in a small percentage of families, less than 1%, and they have this familial gene that causes Alzheimer's disease.
Talk also about the signs of Alzheimer's. They've really identified 10 signs.
Yeah, so there are 10 signs, but they can really be summarized by saying that these are non-normative signs of aging. So typically, we might expect to see some memory loss here and there, some forgetfulness, but these are really more dramatic instances of memory loss and decline in functioning. So typically, the first sign of Alzheimer's disease is memory loss. But for some other people, a decline in non-memory aspects of cognitive functioning, such as word finding or vision issues or impaired reasoning and judgment, those can be the first signs of Alzheimer's disease for some people. Some of the more specific signs are memory loss that disrupts your daily life. And the key to that is it disrupts your daily life. This is not a little bit of forgetfulness here and there. This is a really disruptful thing in your life. Also, challenges in planning or solving problems. For example, a person with normal cognitive functioning can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But for a person with Alzheimer's disease, this may be a very complicated task because it has so many steps involved, getting out the bread, getting out the peanut butter and jelly, and applying those ingredients to the bread. It might even be that the person with Alzheimer's disease will end up with the peanut butter and the jelly on the outside of the sandwich simply because that judgment and that recall of steps can get tangled in their brain and they forget how to do a simple task such as that. Some of the other signs might be difficulty completing familiar tasks at home, work, or leisure. So if you are a person who's suffering from early onset Alzheimer's disease, one of the first signs is having trouble at work. At work, we typically do tasks that we're very used to doing. They're normal for us, and you might start to notice that things aren't seeming so right for you anymore, and this might be a sign. Even at home, having trouble running the dishwasher or finding the correct button to turn on the microwave or the oven can be a sign. One of the other signs is confusion with time or place, and this one can really be exhibited by, for example, a gentleman goes outside in the dead of winter in shorts and a t-shirt just because he simply forgets the season and forgets the time of year. That can also happen in the summer and they're going outside in a parka, for example. So really confusing seasons, times, and places. Most commonly, people don't remember what year it is. And it's difficult, even for someone like me. I might forget what day it is or the date, but eventually I'll figure it out. But for people with Alzheimer's disease, the key is that they may not eventually figure it out. So this is not something that's going to be easily remembered by them. Another sign of Alzheimer's is problems with words in speaking or writing. So for example, I know that the thing that I'm wearing on my left wrist is a watch. But for someone with Alzheimer's disease, they may forget what that word is, and they might call it a hand clock or a wrist clock or something like that.
They might even have trouble writing a check at a store.
Absolutely. So they may forget simply how to spell or what information goes on which line. These sorts of things can become very confusing for them.
A lot of these things might be noticed by others before they're actually noticed by the person themselves. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, it can be. And many times it might be because the person simply doesn't want to notice it themselves. They don't want to admit that they're noticing it. So it is very common for family members and close friends, neighbors, to notice the signs and symptoms first.
And yet there are still more signs that we can be looking for.
Sure, and one of those is misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps. So for example, I might leave my water bottle someplace during my day, but I will have the ability to say, okay, I started at this building, I went to this coffee shop, and I remember having it in my car. But a person with Alzheimer's disease may not have the ability to go back and remember where they were, where they last had their water bottle. And so these things become very difficult for them to do.
Does this also become very frustrating for them? Do we start to see some signs of frustration?
Absolutely. This is very frustrating. And oftentimes in the very beginning of Alzheimer's disease, when all of these frustrations and hard times are happening, people with Alzheimer's disease realize it. They know what's happening to them, and it's very hard for them to deal with.
Are they willing to seek treatment, or is that something that they don't want to face either?
Oftentimes, they really don't want to face it. There is such a stigma with Alzheimer's disease and with any dementia in general that, you're losing your mind, and this is a bad thing. So a lot of people are really hesitant to seek treatment or seek early diagnosis.
And they should be.
Absolutely. There are so many benefits to early diagnosis.
What are some of those benefits?
So the first one is that you can get the maximum benefit from any available treatments. So whether that's enrolling in a clinical trial or using some of the approved Alzheimer's medications that are out in the market, those benefits will be available to you if you receive a diagnosis. Another benefit is having more time to plan for your future, both financially and for your future health care. So knowing that you have this disease and knowing that you're going to have struggles in the future and there's going to come a time where you're going to need help will give you more time to plan for that. You can also identify help and resources not only for yourself, but for your loved ones. Your loved ones are going to be the ones who are really experiencing a lot of burden as well. So identifying this early and being able to seek help and identify the resources and saying, hey, this organization can really help us down the road will be really beneficial. And the last benefit of early diagnosis is really you get the opportunity to educate yourself. Alzheimer's disease is very predictable. It has a very predictable pattern. So we know that certain issues are going to come up, and we know sort of the process of decline that you might be experiencing. So by educating yourself, you can understand what might be happening, but more importantly, your family members are going to understand what they're going to experience while you are battling this disease.
This is tough on the family because all of a sudden someone that you've known for all of these years can't even remember your name.
Right, and that is such a struggle for people. But one of the biggest things that I like to tell people in regard to dealing with this is just be patient and don't argue. A person with Alzheimer's may not remember someone, but don't say, oh, why don't you remember that person? You remember Jim. He's your best friend from work or something like that. Doing that can be more frustrating for everyone. So really the key for family members and friends is to be patient and just sort of go with the flow.
Because if you get agitated, they get agitated. If you stay calm, they more likely will stay calm.
Absolutely. Yes. So if there's agitation in the room, they can feel it and they'll start to get agitated and frustrated. It's just like you or I. If you were angry and mad at me right now, I would feel a sense of worry or, just feel uncomfortable. And that's the same with Alzheimer's disease and with those people who are facing those challenges.
I don't know if this is in the early onset stage or if it's more in the advanced stage, but they will have good days, they will have bad days.
Yes, and that's the thing with dementia is that it's very fluid. So some days, like you said, you'll have a really good day and then the next day will be absolutely terrible. And there's also this phenomenon that we call sundowning, and that's where people are more cognitive and more able to do things in the morning, but by the evening, things are a much bigger struggle for people. So even throughout the day, you can have changes in your cognition.
Again, something that caregivers need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So this is something that we've dealt with in my own family is encouraging people to balance their checkbook in the beginning of the day. Perhaps consider going ahead to prep your dinner meal early in the morning so that at night it's not such a struggle for you.
There is no cure at this point, but there is a lot of research being done. What are you hearing in terms of the advances, I guess, that are being made?
Well, there have been a lot of advances, and most of what we know about Alzheimer's disease, about 90% of what we know, we've discovered in the last 15 years. So there have been a lot of advances of late, but we are still really struggling. We're not sure what causes it. We don't know how to cure it. We don't know how to slow it down. And so it's a big struggle. But there is a big initiative going on right now to be able to understand Alzheimer's by the year 2025.
Well, and that's really what this is all about, isn't it? Is trying to understand it, find ways to cope with it, and really let the person know what lies ahead. Because sometimes the unknown is the scariest factor.
Absolutely. And we have a good idea of what Alzheimer's is. But like I said, there's a ton of research going on right now. And we're really trying to make efforts and advancements in that just so we can help the lives of people.
We have an aging population, so this is something that really needs to be addressed and is being addressed, I think, at maybe a little bit more rapid fashion.
Yes, absolutely. Currently, right now, over 5 million people in the United States have Alzheimer's disease, and that's a good estimate. But we're expecting those numbers to rapidly increase, and that's because Alzheimer's is an age-related disease, and America's aging. So as America continues to age, we're going to see higher proportions of people with Alzheimer's disease.
And in Kansas itself, we have an aging population as well?
Absolutely, yes. Right now, we have about 12% of Kansans who have Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia, and that number is expected to rise to nearly 22% in coming years. So it's a very high population.
If the signs seem to be there, what should people be doing?
The first thing that you need to do is contact your doctor. And it's important to know that there isn't a special Alzheimer's or dementia-related doctor. You can go to your family doctor, and they will initiate the process of figuring out what's going on. It might not be Alzheimer's disease. It might be something else. But if it is Alzheimer's disease, getting that diagnosis early is important.
That's K-State Research and Extension Adult Development and Aging Specialist Erin Yelland. Extension agents offering Alzheimer's programming tailor their material to meet the needs of their county or district. To find out if the program is being offered where you live or when the program will be offered, contact your county or district extension office. And to learn more about Alzheimer's disease, visit the Alzheimer's Association website, www.alz.org/facts. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.